The move to block young children from social media platforms could soon be implemented nationwide. Anthony Albanese has committed to enforcing a minimum age for children to access apps like Facebook, Instagram and TikTok, similar to a proposal flagged by South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas. And he joins me on the program now. Premier, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Did you know this announcement was coming today?
I got a phone call yesterday afternoon from the Prime Minister, and I was really grateful for it, Laura, to be honest. We raised this issue. I raised this issue at National Cabinet on Thursday and Friday of last week, and I've been keeping my colleagues, both the Prime Minister but also state premiers and chief ministers around the country, aware of the work that we were doing from the Robert French review. And we received the report late last week. We discussed it at National Cabinet last week, released the report on Sunday, but to so quickly see the Prime Minister essentially adopt that report is something I'm really grateful for. It means we get a nationwide solution, which is a far better approach than a hotchpotch of arrangements around states, which is what we've been advocating for from the outset. So, needless to say, I was pretty happy when we got that phone call. Yeah,
you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here, and certainly we need a lot more details. You've nominated 14. The Prime Minister hasn't put an age on it this morning. Do you know where he's thinking?
Well, look, there's a few different options that are available to the federal government. We've suggested it should be essentially banned or a limit for under 14, and then for 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds, parental consent would be required. Now, if the Commonwealth, if the federal government decides to go with a different model, I think there have been suggestions out in the public realm about taking it up to 16. I've got to say we would be fine with that. I think there is a value in consistency around the country. I put a premium on uniformity and consistency over any specific age that we choose. I think the critical principle here is that we have a legislated framework that prohibits social media companies from just allowing kids to sign up to their platforms with impunity without any reference to the fact that we know it's doing kids harm and it's addictive. So, I mean, this is a reform that is, you know, in the context of the challenge, in many respects overdue. I think parents around the country have been crying out for a bit of leadership on this. And the initiative that we took here in South Australia, the fact it's now going to sort of apply nationally, I could not be happier because this matters to parents.
Okay, so from what we know of the detail, and we're yet to hear all the detail, to be frank, but from what the Prime Minister has told you, is this adopting the model that you've proposed pretty much nationwide?
Look, you know, that'll be up for the Prime Minister to announce during the course of the day and over the days ahead. But it's what he did make clear to me yesterday, and this has already been referenced in the news release that the federal government has put out, is that the French review has very much informed their position. And what the French review proposes is a legislative framework that puts a positive duty and obligation on social media services to ensure that children aren't getting access to their platforms. And that makes sense. There's a lot of detail that sits within that report. It's 276 pages, and I think there is a document there that gives the federal government and the parliament the ability to run with.
I mean, even if it was above 14, above 16, and then children were essentially allowed to go on social media, you know, why the threshold there? And, I mean, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but the algorithms are a big problem as well. In this legislation, should there be... Should we be going that next step as well, so that the social media companies cannot feed harmful content through their algorithms without any oversight to teenagers, even if they are 16 or 17 or 18?
Look, I've always had the view, Laura, that, you know, politics is the art of the possible, but at the same time we've got to put in place a framework, or any legislative effort to address this challenge needs to be able to be implemented and enforced. And what Robert French, the former Chief Justice of the High Court, was very keen to make sure is that his recommendations reflected something that could be practically delivered, that could be enforced by an independent regulator. And I think that's why focusing on an age limit that kids below could not get access to social media was able to be enforced by a regulator, whether it be the E-Safety Commission or otherwise. And I think that's what we've got to focus on. We've got to keep our eye on the prize here, and that is getting kids off social media, so that heaven forbid they might be engaging with each other in a more traditional means that we know is socially healthy.
That's right. What about the time frame here? Just quickly on that. I mean, why do we have to wait to the end of the year? I know there are complications, but you were willing to do that in a tighter time frame. Why the end of the year?
Oh no, we actually think that the end of the year is a pretty good time frame. So up until the announcement from the Prime Minister this morning, what we said on the weekend was we released this report. We were going to go out to public consultation with the view to get legislation refined from the model that French proposed. I mean, where are we? We're September now.
Yeah,
footy finals. Before we know it, it'll be Christmas. Yeah, before we know it, it'll be Christmas. So trying to get this through the federal parliament by the end of the year, I think, is pretty ambitious, and I award that ambition because it reflects the challenge and the urgency of the matter here. And I also welcome the fact that, for all intents and purposes, I understand that this is a proposition that's got bipartisan support. So
indeed,
hopefully we can get it done by
one
Christmas.
of the rare areas. But what about those teenagers that are already on these platforms? Is it going to be hard to kick them off?
Look, I'm sure that represents a challenge, no doubt. But, we're talking about 12, 13-year-old kids, Laura. I mean, if we know that this is a product that is doing them harm, then we've got a duty to do something about it.
Indeed.
And it seems like an extreme comparison, but I've likened this to, for cigarettes or drugs or alcohol. We know when these things do kids harm, we've got to protect them from it as best as we can. It doesn't fix every problem. No one's suggesting that this is a silver bullet, but it will make a difference, and a positive difference at that.